350 of these episodes, 350 of those damn things, guys. And, there's been a lot of great Patriots people around, but the first true Patriots person that was ever brought in was Pat. So, the last time you and I spoke, Drake May hadn't even started a game yet.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
And they've won another 3 games since that point, too.
Yeah, unfortunately. Should have the number 1 pick right now, and they don't, but that's okay. What are you going to do?
Exactly. I've been saying this for a while, and also I say this too for this week, because last week I recorded with McGarvin, and I remember because I recorded in the basement, and my wife's like, "Why are you recording now?" And I'm like, "This is the best time of year to talk." Like, because look, and he even put it best too, where it's like there's no disappointments, there's nothing to like look forward to in the sense of like disappointment and anxiety, but there's so much hypotheticals and wonderings. And then there's this week, which for people like you and me, it's great. It's, hey, groundwork for free agency, groundwork for the combine, just a lot of groundwork going on within the league. It's basically the best way to describe it this week. And for a lot of the people that are in Indy, it's kind of you're fishing where the fish are, because, it's like everyone truly together, because not every team's at the Super Bowl or has representatives at the Super Bowl, at least to my knowledge, like to the higher ranking.
Not like this. No.
And well, too, there's a fair bit. Sorry to cut you off. I noticed there's a fair bit of Patriots reporters that are in Indy that I feel like that are usually there. Like even last year, I don't think it was this many people.
He has a ton of people there, which is pretty cool. So
your boys from CLNS.
Yep. Taylor and Ahmed are both there, and Brian Hines there as well. So, it's one of those things that this week, and Phil Perry called it the illegal tampering period. Where people are having conversations. And I'm having a conversation with an agent of a player that's currently on my team, but he also happens to represent a player that's not on my team. And we might just have a conversation about that. Off the record, of course.
Over steak and bourbon.
And so it's right. And so it's one of those things that, these conversations and deals happen. Of course, we all understand that because 30 seconds into the legal tampering period, we have, 10 contracts getting signed. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, everyone knows and understands what the deal is. But it is like this week is such a fascinating week. And the combine, I don't want to say it matters a little bit less. It does, I think, matter a little bit less on the field than it used to, right? These guys, really a ton of them don't throw or run at the combine. A lot of them will just save that for their pro day.
Like Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, Shedeur and Cam Ward. There's no reason for them to do anything at the combine. No reason. There's just the only thing that can happen is something bad. Why would you ever do something that it makes no sense, especially Cam Ward? And maybe Shedeur maybe won't be a top 5 pick. I still think he will be. But like Cam Ward, I think is pretty solidified as a top 5 pick. Why would he ever do anything at the combine? The only thing that could happen is he could do something stupid or look bad in some way. And now he hurts his draft stock. You can't help your draft stock from there. And so, it's one of those things that like, maybe it matters a little bit less than it did. I still think it matters. I still like seeing it. I still like seeing the guys out there competing, and kind of getting ready for those things. And look, it doesn't always transfer, as we've seen with a ton of guys, Tyquan Thornton being one of them, Darius Hayward-Bay, all these guys that ran super fast. And it's like, this doesn't matter,
Worthy to an extent as well.
Worthy to an extent, although I think Worthy's going to be a good player for the Chiefs, mainly because he plays for the Chiefs, right? And they know how to use him, and he's a serviceable player. But the stuff for me really is the interviews, right? The fact that you get to interview those guys, right, and really sit down with them. And one of my favorite Patriots stories, and I just heard this one like through the grapevine from someone who heard it from someone who heard it from someone. And I don't know if it's ever been like officially reported. I'm sure it has been by someone. I don't know. But Brandon Spikes, right, had interview at the combine or whatever, and they're all talking to him, and they're, hey, what type of player are you, and this and that, blah blah. And he goes, you know what? Nobody gives a bleep about your individual stats. And he takes off his championship ring and he goes, it's all about one of these. And he slaps it on the table. And everyone just was like, all right, we got to draft this guy. Like, and it's just one of those things where like you like guys can make an impact if they can have those conversations, and you get to see the type of players and people that they are. And of course, you ask some weird questions, you ask some outside the box questions because you want to get them thinking. You want to catch them in a moment, right? They
Keep them
spend
on their
so
toes.
much time, especially if you're not going to run at the combine. They spend so much time. This is what you're going to say, prepping. It's all that stuff. It's like you're, being it's like you're a witness on the witness stand, right?
Yeah.
They coach you up as to what to say. And so you're trying to find that question that's going to throw them off their game. And you're looking for an answer to it. And it can be a dumb question, right? It shouldn't be offensive. Like, when people were asking, Des Bryant about his mom was a stripper or some bullshit like that. Like, it's not that. Like, we're not, don't be doing that. But,
I think the league also cracked down on that.
they 100% did, right? But it's like, how, can we ask a question that's outside the box that they're not thinking about the answer to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, throw them off their game a little bit, and then maybe you get a real answer instead of a coached answer, and that's what you're looking for, really,
Yeah, no, exactly. Like this is gonna be really weird, but I remember I watched a few episodes of that terrible Hernandez show on Hulu or it was FX, but I watched it on Disney Plus.
Okay.
But I remember the parts where he was like, he didn't want to go to the combine. He was basically told like, "Hey, do this. You're going to talk to these teams," and then the teams would basically they did like little montages of like, "Hey, I think it was like the Patriots, the Eagles, and a few other teams where it's like, this is what's going to happen." I remember that too. I think they also asked someone as well, but if their mom was a prostitute or something like that as well. So I know the league really
Checks out.
said like, "Hey, stop asking questions like that. Like it looks
Right.
bad. No one needs to answer those questions." But this week's and also I said this whole thing about steak and bourbon too, because I know there's a lot of off the record stuff.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like you catch a lot of people off their element to where they let stuff slide. Like honestly, it's like the stories you hear of like where the bodies are buried in a sense. Even something like the league meetings coming up next month. Those are things that like the average fan's not paying attention to. Like this week, there's a lot of people that will watch the draft coming up at the end of April. They're not watching this week. They're not gonna
Right.
watch hoping a Chris Jones incident from 2016 happens again. With little much the eye. But the other thing with the combine too is I know there's been those reports for years where they want to try to move it to make it like the traveling road show of what the drafts become. I don't think they should do that. If they want to find another home, it's great. But I feel like I'm moving it to like an LA or a Florida, like doesn't do any serviceable. It's just like, hey, it's warm weather. Meanwhile, Indy, it's just like apparently everything's close. It's been there for years. It's become this big deal where even now we've started to see stuff today with it seems Travis Kelce's coming back. But I'm gonna say this. I need to hear it from the horse's mouth first before I really buy into that. But then even now there's reports coming out about, hey, this guy's draft stock, or even the weird one to me is Tet McMillan, who originally was supposed to be like a top 5-10 pick, but then now it's like, oh, if he runs like a 4.5, it's like, oh, he's not viewed as good. And also with my worthy comment earlier, I was saying more to the extent of like the combine heroes that don't usually work out. That's why I said he's the bit of the exception, because look, he is
Right.
one of the more focal points of their offense. It's just instead of, hey, run a straight line, catch the ball and go boom, it was like, hey, run a straight line, jump through a hoop, jump over the two dogs, jump over the obstacle, go through the obstacle course, and then you could catch the ball and run. But no, there's a lot that goes on. Like we were saying, it's
Yeah.
chance like, and the player interviews are the big one, but also too
Yeah.
the trade talks are the big one, because I didn't get to watch it last year, but I know a lot of the talk with the Patriots and Giants was happening there, and also I think the Brian Burns deal from last year with Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
those
That
talks.
originated there too.
I know no, I think it originated in Mobile, but it really I think started to pick up. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna see stuff pick up. You're gonna also play agents going there saying like, hey, what do you hear about me? Like even I know Trey Smith, someone Patriots fans wanted, now is expected to sign a 5-year deal in Kansas City apparently. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens there. But there's already a lineman I moved on in, and my number one lineman target right now still is Patrick McCary. So
Yeah.
well, I say that too because he's kind of the Swiss Army knife where you can kind of plug him in anywhere.
Yeah. I don't dislike McCary or McCary. I think that there are better options out there. For me, the number one guy is Ronnie Stanley. Sounds like Baltimore's committed to keeping him, which
Yeah.
makes sense. Hello, right? But
Another example of
I
why this
also
week's
think,
great, though.
yeah, and that's the thing, is that there are guys that are out there. A guy Matt and I were talking about this last night about, we did a little bit of a free agent preview, and Tevin Jenkins is a guy that I think is an underrated name that, I don't know if he'll be back with the Bears. Maybe he will be, maybe he won't. I don't know. But if he's available, he's a guy that really struggled and found his own last year and really the last kind of 2 years. And I think would make a lot of sense to bring him in. He's not to the level that, a guy like Trey Smith is, but I think you can plug him in right away at left guard and feel good about it,
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're really looking for. But as far as you were talking about them trying to move Indy, and I just think, it's the classic case of the NFL just trying to make money off of something they don't need to make money off of. Like, you don't need places bidding to get the combine. You just don't need that. Just have it at Indy. You print money. You're the NFL, for Christ's sake. You make like $1 trillion every year. Just have the combine at Indy. Everyone likes it there. It is, as you said, it's a walking city. So everyone walks everywhere. There's the places that people have been going forever. Like, it's just, why do we need to mix it up? And then it's like, all right, we're going to do it in LA. Well, now where's everyone to go in LA? Like, I don't understand why they feel the need to mix things up. It just, that stuff drives me crazy. And it's the NFL, and the NFL is going to NFL, and I get that. But like, man, just let them, let us have Indianapolis for the combine, because that's where everyone's been going for the last however many years, right? And since it started. And by the way, fun fact, Nancy Meyer has been with the Patriots forever. Nancy Meyer is one of the people responsible for starting the NFL combine and getting it up and running. So, Patriots have a hand in that.
Yeah, that's I just say Indy too, because like I said, the combine, you're not going to get like what Detroit last year. I think it was like 700,000 people showing up for the draft.
Yeah.
Because I still say this, the Super Bowl has their rotation of cities where they're just always going to go. You have, which I think like the LA, Vegas, Phoenix, New Orleans, Miami, Atlanta, etc.
Right.
The draft is for the cities that won't ever get a Super Bowl, like how it's been Kansas City, Detroit, Green Bay, Pittsburgh.
I'd love to see it here in New England. It'd be so cool.
I'm going to ask you about that. If it was in New England, would it be in Foxborough, or would it be like Quincy or something, like Quincy Market or something like that, like downtown Boston?
That's a good question. They probably would have to do it downtown Boston. You'd have to, right? You couldn't do it in Foxborough. It wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't have enough. You wouldn't be able to hold the people. You'd have to do it in Boston. I mean, the city would shut down. It would be wild. So I would absolutely love that, though. I'd be a big fan. I'd be a big proponent of that, for sure.
Buffalo's another rumored one coming up because they're getting a new stadium, obviously, after this season. But yeah, that's the thing with where it's like the Super Bowl's the corporate event. The NFL event's the one I feel like is truly for the fan, because it's like, look, by day 3, most people are tapped out of the draft. And I'm not trying to say that in a rude way. It's just like, by then it's the sickos paying attention on day 3. Yeah. It's the sickos. And also, by the way, Pat was referring to Matt, who's now actually a friend of the show too. Him and I chatted a few weeks ago. But yeah, and then the combine, look, it's for the true sickos. They average, I think, 200K is their television viewership for most of it. So it's, like I said, the average fan's not going to sit down and watch these guys run around in skin tight shorts or even their underwear.
Right.
But yeah, no, it advertises a lot. It does a lot. But how I was talking about Tank McMillan earlier. So Hayden Winks, I saw this earlier. He works for Underdog.
Mm-hmm.
He said that this is pretty much the consensus out of the combine, that the Titans go Carter, which is unfortunate because he's my ride or die number 1.
Love him. Yeah.
Browns go Cam Ward. Giants go Travis Hunter, which I don't understand that pick. I also don't understand the Stafford to the Giants talk. Like, I understand you want to get paid, but why are you going to get your ass kicked the last few years?
Yeah, it makes no sense. Yeah.
But that's the thing I'm saying, though, is if Hunter and Carter are gone at 3, if you're the Patriots, do you trade back at 4 or do you go next best player? Because I still think if Shedeur is there, you can move back with a team like a New York, like a Vegas, or maybe even a New Orleans, to where you're still in the top 10 and you can still get a Kelvin Banks or a Will Campbell.
Yeah, I mean, here's the hardest part, right? The hard thing is, where do you see, Will Campbell playing? If you think Will Campbell has a chance to be a Hall of Fame left tackle, then you have to strongly consider taking him at number 4. Now, that depends, right? Have you signed Ronnie Stanley in free agency, right?
Yeah.
Have you filled that need already? And Mike Vrabel talked about it, by the way, today at the combine. And he basically said, we want to have our roster filled out and then the draft comes in, right? And I think that, that's the best way to approach it. You don't want to have a glaring need. And this is one of those things, and I don't know if it was Daniel Jeremiah, somebody made a mock draft and they put Will Campbell at number 4. And they just flat out said, like, he's not the best player on my board, but like the Patriots need offensive line help. And it's like, that's the absolute last thing you want to do. Like, the Patriots need help everywhere. So I know that your offensive line stinks. I know you need offensive line help, but like, you can't reach for a player that shouldn't be taken at number 4 just because you need that position. That's the wrong way to build your team, especially when you're in a full rebuild mode like the Patriots are. And so for me, if you can get a buyer for him, do it, right? If you fall in love with Jalen Walker, with Michael Williams, with Mason Graham, and you want to make one of those guys number 4, and you think that those guys can change the face of what you do defensively, then do it. Otherwise, I'm trading back.
I would only trade back just because if Shador's there and you, like I said, you have the team that's willing to come up that needs a quarterback. I don't think it's and also I'll say this too. I know there was a report that came out recently that said that the Jets were interested in trading for the number 1 pick. If the Patriots held that pick, there's no way in hell that trade happens. But that's why I say, like, if a Vegas comes knocking, and also too, because Vegas, you have a rookie GM in Spy Tech, which is, I love how people bring that. Like, Brady hires a guy with Spy in his name. But if you have that, it goes back to the movie Draft Day where Kevin Costner took advantage of a young GM. If Jacksonville's, I don't know why Jacksonville would move up unless there's someone Jacksonville's in love with. Same thing. You can take advantage of a young GM who's still getting his feet wet. That's where I look at it. Like, I would look at doing that, like almost not bullying, but kind of pressuring someone into making a move to giving up a little bit more to get to what they want, because it's just like the whole cat and mouse game of like, oh, I don't know. Do you want this guy? Yeah, we want him. Oh, we may take him right here. And it's like, I think if number 4, if it plays out like that, where Carter to the Titans, which doesn't make sense to me unless they sign someone in free agency, and then Hunter to the Giants, which they'll look cool, but they'll win 4 games again.
Right.
They'll be getting arched. Excuse me. They're going to be getting Eli's nephew in 2026.
Right.
But that's the thing with 4, where it's that cat and mouse game, to where it's not going to be like, hey, 10 o'clock hits, picks in. That's going to be like 2 minutes, 1 minute to when the pick hits. Because if they end up taking someone at 4, I'll be okay with it. But at the same time, too, if you want to trade back, even another name to get to is, we said Will Campbell, but like Will Johnson out of Michigan, Mason Graham out of Michigan, who's someone I've kind of was on since last year as well, because and I know everyone's like, oh, Patriots need offensive line. Well, it's like, look, they need another rusher to go along with Christian Barmore, which we don't know his health status. People say edge rusher, which, yes, edge rushers are there. Carter's a generational pass rusher. But I still say this, that I think Keon White with the right coaching is going to be a lot better. But the other pivot point that I want to bring to you is the fact that Matt Vrabel presser today, he said he doesn't want to give up on the 24 draft class. I know, look, besides Drake, there's a lot of question marks there. There's Jalen Polk didn't play well, which I also think in part is due to coaching. Same thing with Javon Baker.
Yep.
And the obvious other ones too, Layden Robinson, Caden Wallace, Layden Robinson, and then the other guy who I don't know if he's going to get playing time on defense, but a pick that I really liked from this year was Marcellus Dial on special teams as a gunner. Yeah. So where, and also I think this too, I said this last week to McGarvin, I wanted to see what you think, because I thought by the end of everything, Kayshon Boutte, as of now, could be receiver number 1. He was thinking that he could be the odd man out because he's a 6th round pick, and because, you have a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick, to which if you give up on those sooner, it looks worse than giving up on a 6th. So and also to the other draft pick that looked good as well as Joe Milton, which if the Patriots end up trading Joe Milton, look, it may suck, but if some team's willing to give you something for him, I say do it. So after my rambling TED talk, let's get your thoughts.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm on board with trading Joe Milton for sure. If you can get a day 2 pick for him, then I'm doing it. If I'm getting a round 4, round 5 pick, to me, it's not worth it. I'd rather hold on to him, see if you can build him up even a little bit more, showcase him a little bit here and there, and then maybe someone gets desperate. Someone sees him and says, whoa, okay, this kid really has grown a lot. So
someone has an injury in training camp and they need a backup.
Right. And so something like that. As far as the Giants, you mentioned the Giants. I just want to go back to that real quick. You're bringing back two guys in the Giants. They're both in the hot seat. If they don't figure out quarterback in free agency, which, by the way, I think they will. I think they'll trade for Kirk Cousins. I think they'll trade for Matt Stafford. I think they'll do something to get a guy. Right. If they don't figure that out, they have to draft a quarterback number 3. They have to. They don't have a choice because you have to try to save your job. And to do that, you have to take the quarterback, right?
Absolutely.
And so, again, whether it's trading for one or signing one, if they haven't traded for one or signed one by the time the draft starts, then they're drafting a quarterback. And it doesn't matter if Shedeur Sanders isn't worthy of the number 3 pick. They're taking him at number 3 because that's the only thing that's going to save their job. Travis Hunter is not saving your job, right? And I think everyone knows that. And so that's one of those things that I think works in the Patriots' favor, right? And now we'll see what happens, of course, in free agency. But if they don't handle it in free agency, that helps the Patriots a lot because now you're talking about if Cam Ward goes number 2 or even number 1 and Shedeur goes number 3, now you're guaranteed Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. And so that's, that to me is huge. But to your point about Kayshon Boutte, look, I think it'll be, here's the way I look at it. I think Mike Vrabel, frankly, he doesn't give a shit about where you were drafted. Who drafted you, where you were drafted, what pick, who cares? I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Not only does it not matter to me, they're not even my guys. So what difference does it make if, he was a 6th-round draft pick is about a 2nd-round draft pick. So what? He was a 2nd-round draft pick. Yeah, that's the last guy. That's why he's out of here because he couldn't draft anyone, right? And so I think they're going to give these guys a shot. But if we go into training camp and Kayshon Boutte is still the best receiver on the field, there's no way he's getting cut, right? Now, maybe you want to say, okay, he looks the same as Javon Baker, and him and Baker are on the exact same playing field, and it's like, which guy do we keep? They're both the last, kind of that last guy. Well, now I can see that argument, but
yeah,
he was the best receiver for the Patriots last year. And you look at some of the analytical numbers, and it's not great. The separation numbers from Boutte weren't great last year. He obviously had some big drops towards the end of the year, but he's trending in the right direction to be that, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Not a great player, but a good player, a serviceable guy. And I think that's beneficial for you. If Jalen Polk can become that guy, then sure, I'm willing to move off of Kayshon Boutte if that means I have a guy that can step in and do that same role that I like better, that I think has more upside, fine. But, I think the odds of Jalen Polk and Javon Baker realizing their potential and becoming good, serviceable NFL players is not very high. You just don't see that happen a lot where a guy comes in and looks like absolute garbage and then turns into a good player. It just almost never happens. And so I don't know. We'll see.
So I was only saying that and also that was not me saying Kayshon Boutte's wide receiver 1 like at the start of training camp. No, that's like as of right now, February 25th.
Oh, I agree.
Right now, he's the best. And also I saw other reports too where it's like, oh, like this is the room, and it's like Kendrick Bourne traded. I'm like, no, I don't know. Look, he's not the best player on paper, but for what he brings off the field, you keep Kendrick Bourne on your roster. You need those glue guys to keep together. I just wanted to bring that up because I was like, Boutte really emerged. He seemed to be Drake's security blanket. He had that amazing touchdown catch against Buffalo, the drop in the bucket. But, the way I look at this roster right now, it's a lot because it's not just like, hey, they get a right tackle, a left tackle, a right tackle, and they go. It's not you get a wide receiver 1, you go, which I'll say this right now. I was kind of I would have been happy to get Higgins, but at the same time too, if we don't have to pay T Higgins $30 to $35 million to be, a 1 when he's really a 1B2, I'm okay with that.
Right.
The one player who I've been on that I'm starting to get on more now because of where Ted McMillan's being mocked is a Chris Godwin. I know there's injury concerns there, but if they want to get a Ted McMillan or another receiver late in the like an Emeka Ibuka in Tampa, although I would love him in New England, 2 reasons: 1, for the watch Bostonians try to say the name; 2, because of his name; but 3, because he's a hell of a ball player. But my thing with Godwin is with Tampa. If you look at their situation, Mike Evans right there, boom, one of the best wide receivers in NFL history, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Jalen McMillan, I know a lot of people really like to do the whole they passed on McConkey for Polk, where it's like, yeah, but you could have had Jalen McMillan, who came from the same school.
Yep.
It was kind of like the afterthought, because if you remember Washington that year, it was Odunze and it was Polk. McMillan was there. He was
McMillan
good.
was hurt.
But he was hurt.
Right. By the way, I have Thor Nystrom on for my draft recap every year.
Yeah.
And Thor goes, "You drafted the third best wide receiver from Washington. The guy you should have taken was Jalen McMillan, and you took Jalen Polk instead. And McMillan went a full round later. He's like, he hated the Jalen Polk pick. Matter of fact, he gave the Patriots an F last year. So,
the way that's the thing with draft evaluation too. I'm always kind of bullish on when everyone's like, "You had such a bad draft." I'm like, I feel like you have to wait at least until year 2 or year 3.
You do, yeah,
to like fully evaluate the draft class, because like where everyone's like, they hit it out of the park, they did great. Like, look at the Giants in 2022, where it was like 5-7. They got Thibodeau at 5, who's looked good. He's taking some time, but he looks good. But then you got Evan Neal at 7, where it's like him and Aquanu, who I remember the day you got me on the show, tailgate with Renner and Mike, I'm blanking on his name.
Austin Gale.
No, Austin Gale and Renner, former guest of the show, Austin Gale. Like the old school days of this program. But with that, they're the ones who were like those guys I remember hearing about. And it was like, Aquanu and thing. It was Tyler Linderbaum, who's a stud center, probably one of the top centers in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but Marner scores in overtime. But
they gave up a goal in the last like 5 minutes too.
They tied it with like 30 seconds to go. And then
of course they did. Yeah, of course they did.
But, what was I going to say? But going back to my point, though, with that, and it was also to like hearing about those guys and then like basically thinking of Aquanu and Neal, I always thought of like, hey, maybe the Patriots give a shake at in free agency on a rebound, because look at Mekhi Becton. But then I remember, Mekhi Becton went to the best situation possible, to where now some team's going to give Mekhi Becton a lot of money and it's not going to be lived up to it. There's a lot of those contracts that get handed out.
100%.
And I want to warn Patriots fans about this right now. If they don't go on a cuckoo spending spree, I'm saying, hey, do better than just drafting Chuks Okorafor and saying this is what we're going to do. But if they do minimal free agency and they land a couple of guys who end up being key impact players, I feel like that'd be fine. But there's a player in my head today for a position of need that I thought you could call about in a trade. So with Cleveland, how Myles Garrett wants out, but even Cleveland's not budging. We'll see. We don't know what's going to happen with Watson. He'll probably be gone. If you're the Patriots, why not call and say, what is David Njoku's price?
Yeah, that's not a terrible idea. Yeah, I like Njoku too, and I think that he's a good player, and Cleveland's just a mess right now. And so, trying to get anyone out of there would be nice, I think. So, I'd be on board with that. I think too, when you look around at what's going on and where the Patriots are, right? They have to spend money. They don't have a choice, right? Because there's a spending floor as well that you have to get above, and they're below it right now, right? And so they have to get above that floor.
Mr. Lane, I have a point to make.
Yes.
Mr. Lane, math teacher, I have a point to make. I didn't mean it in the sense of like they're not going to spend the money, but when they're not out there, hey, you get $20 million. You get 45 of your contract guaranteed. You get this. If they're not signing the top free agents on day one, I don't need people freaking out. Where it's like, player went to this because you got to remember, the Commanders are third in salary cap. The Bears are up there. I know they struggled towards the end of the season, but the Arizona Cardinals have money to spend, and they showed a lot of promise last year.
Yep.
The Chargers have money to spend. So when you have those teams that either made the playoffs or were just on the cusp of the playoffs, I'm just saying to not be prepared to be disappointed, but maybe be prepared to not get the guys you wanted.
And I'm with you on that, and I fully agree with you on that point. I think too, when you look at where the Patriots are, right?
Yeah.
They got to spend the money, right? They have to spend the money. But again, as you said, everyone now has money, right? The cap went up a ton, and so teams that maybe thought they didn't have a ton of money now all of a sudden do have a ton of money. And so, the Patriots aren't just like, oh, well, we're the only ones with money, so we can just overpay everyone and it's fine. Like, that's not how it's going to work. Guys are going to get overpaid. they're going to get overpaid by everyone. And so the Patriots should go out there and they should get, dumb with their money and spend some crazy money and give a few crazy contracts out. But they also don't have to go out and spend everything either.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's like, well, we want Ronnie Stanley. Okay, well, maybe Ronnie Stanley's not available. Okay, well, if Ronnie Stanley's available, we want Trey Smith. Okay, Trey Smith's available. Okay, so then where are the guys that we get? Look, I go back to 01, and that's a long way back, right? The league is very different than it was in 01.
Oh, yeah.
But if you go back to 01 and you look at their signings from 2001, not one big name guy on that list. Not one, at least at the time. But you're talking about Mike Vrabel. You're talking about David Patton. You're talking about Anthony Pleasant. You're talking about Roman Pfeiffer. You're talking about these are all guys that became real contributors for your team, where you were able to plug those guys. Antoine Smith, you were able to plug those guys in, and all of a sudden, your team went from good to really good. Brian Cox came in that year. Like it's those types of things where and then, Mike Vrabel was a no-name guy when you signed him. Turned out to be a great player, right? Now, of course, the head coach now. But so I'm okay with targeting some guys like that are a little bit under the radar. But you also got to go out and get some guys too, right? You got to sign some guys because right now your team stinks, right? You really have not much talent. You have a quarterback, you have a cornerback, maybe you have a D tackle depending on how healthy he is. But outside of that, you don't have much. You have some depth pieces that are good depth guys, but aren't really front end starters. You don't really have. I mean, you think about if you would just take the AFC East. Forget about the whole AFC. Just take the AFC East and you build a team out of the AFC East. If you built a full team, like a 53-man roster, out of the 4 teams of the AFC East, how many Patriots do you think would make the list? 4? 5? Not many. Drake May's making the list, and Christian Gonzalez is making the list, and Christian Barmore's probably making the list, and I guess Marcus Jones is probably making the list because of what he does, return game and stuff like that. But then you start getting into it, and you're like, all right, are you getting any of the running backs? Probably not. I think maybe, but probably not. Are you getting any of the wide receivers? Almost definitely not. Are you maybe taking Hunter Henry, I guess, potentially, right? Jonnu Smith had a great year in Miami. Buffalo, I guess, has 2 guys that are pretty good.
Knox has been really quiet the last couple of years.
Okay, so Kincaid, but is it Kincaid and Jonnu Smith, and you're not keeping a third tight end? Because, and so now it's like, okay, well, if it's not Hunter Henry, well, then now who is it? Is it Dietrich Wise? Is it Lawrence Guy? Is it, who's not even here, by the way? I don't even know what I'm talking about. So now you start looking at it and you're like, oh, yeah, okay. You just talking about the AFC East. We're talking about top 53-man roster. The Patriots got 5-6 guys on it.
Yeah.
And that's real concerning when you look around your division and you say, we don't even have guys that would make a roster. We had guys starting last year that wouldn't make rosters basically anywhere else. And that's concerning, right? And so you have to fix that problem. And you also want those blue chip guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And you got a few, you need more.
So my thing with there's certain signings right now they made, Jeremiah Farms, great to have as backup option practice squad. Same with Demontre Jacobs, good to have on the practice squad. You can be in uniform, just not on the field.
Right.
Vidarian Lowe is another good option to have as a swing option as well. Hey, not starter. He did catch a touchdown. He also, for as bad as he's been, he was pretty consistently okay. I feel with some linemen, if you don't have to call their name out, there's a couple times where it happened, but it wasn't, oh my God, Vidarian Lowe, liability. It wasn't that to where it's okay. Ben Brown even is another example of that.
Yeah, people got on me for Vidarian Lowe last year because I said Vidarian Lowe was their best tackle last year. You're crazy. Vidarian Lowe's the worst player for his. I'm like, okay, fine, but he was their most consistent tackle last year, and that doesn't mean he's good, but they were in a decent spot with Vidarian Lowe, and you felt like if Vidarian Lowe was the worst player on your offensive line, you'd feel okay about your offensive line because you'd feel like, all right, we got 4 guys that are competent, good players.
Mm-hmm.
This guy kind of stinks. And we got to help him out, but we can help him out a little bit because we got 4 guys we can depend on, right? We can have one weak link. when he's like the second best player in your line, that's not good.
Problem.
You know what I mean? And so that's the issue, is that I think he's a little bit better than what we saw last year. It's just that, he's not an every down starter. I think he's an okay swing tackle. I really do think he can be an okay swing tackle. He's just not a consistent starter every day.
Break glass in case of emergency kind of guy.
Exactly.
It's like Ben Brown too. Same thing with bringing
Yeah.
Ben Brown back. Don't have a problem with that. The only other real in-house guy that like I want to see brought back is Jonathan Jones, which for everyone saying, oh, they move on. No. It's the same thing as Bourne. It's a leader in the room. It's all that stuff. But with leaders in the room, do we see David Andrews on this roster in 25, or do we think it's on to greener pastures?
So I think for him, it just depends on what he wants, right? And maybe they see a center in free agency and they look at it and think like, all right, I think the center from the Falcons, I believe, is a pretty good player. He is a free agent now.
Drew
Again,
Allman.
he could go back. Yes, thank you. He could end up back in Atlanta, right? But I think there are a few centers out there that maybe, you feel pretty good about. I think even if David Andrews is coming back, I'd be drafting a center at some point in the draft, and seeing if, I can kind of develop that guy and turn him into the next guy. You would think if David Andrews is playing, it's one more year, right? That he's basically almost done.
Oh yeah. I could also see a world where David Andrews gets into training camp or like mini camp, and then he's kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm good. Like I'll chill. I'll do my podcast with Hoyer and go from there.
Yeah.
But no, these next 2 weeks aren't going to define like what the season is, because look, most fans, I feel like some are going to have like the opinions of where it's like, oh, you got to do this. I'll say this. This team, I think, in the AFC East for long term is in the best position to improve, considering, look, we know what we're getting with Buffalo. New York is just, I like what Aaron Glenn's selling, but I always wait for a way for them to screw it up, Like it's not Detroit, but it's gonna like they'll be decently. Look, for them, it's like
the Jets.
They're exactly. The Jets. Exactly. You wait for them to screw it up.
Right.
But then you have the Miami Dolphins, who are really at a crossroads right now, where I was saying this after the year, but if they didn't hand out contract extensions to Greer and McDaniel, I think both of them would have been fired at the end of the year.
Yeah. It was a rough year for them.
Yeah.
They dealt with a lot of injuries too, but and I think that they fought through. They showed a lot of adversity, I thought, and so I was I walked away actually kind of impressed with what he did last year. But I just think, man, you got to bring something more to the table than that. Yeah. That's just not good enough. And so I don't know.
Yeah, because even too, when you look at the entire division, like the entire conference right now, because look, there's always changeover every year. Like out of the 7 teams that made the playoffs last year, I would say right now there's probably 3 that I would consider locks to make it for next year. And I think we all know who those 3 locks are going to be. And for everyone saying, oh, like, what about this team? It's like, well, Houston, I don't know what to think, just because, look, I still think that, look, without Collins, Stroud's numbers drastically dropped. Yeah. Jacksonville, I think there's a path for them to get better. I like what look, Liam Cohen's good. I feel old now because they decided to hire a coordinator who's, I know you're much older than me, but for me.
All right, hold on. Much older. Hold on. No, okay. I'm just kidding.
31. But when there's coordinators out there that are 29 years old,
yeah,
that makes me feel old. That's where I'm like, oh my God, I'm old. Like when the coaches are my age.
Yep.
At the professional level. Grant Urdinsky, and then there's also Declan Doyle in Chicago, who are both under the age of 30. So you have that team, like you don't know what they're going to be. The Colts, same thing with them. The AFC North, I'll say this right now. Cincinnati, I don't think is missing the playoffs for a 3rd year in a row. I'm just going to come out and say that. I don't think 3 years in a row they miss out. If they do, something seriously wrong happen there. Like, it's like season falls off the rails. And even this year too, they were severely just restricted to what they burned themselves. Hey, we beat them week 1. And
I'm fascinated. with Cleveland, with Cincinnati. It's a fascinating team because, Joe Burrow's made it very public that he wants to bring everyone back. They want to make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-QB in NFL history. They want to bring T. Higgins back. They want to do all that, right? 40 million, right? They want to do all that stuff. Great. That's great. But your defense is absolute, like,
Garbage.
flaming dog poo. It's awful. And so is it smart for you to bring T. Higgins back and sign Jamar Chase, and now you have no money for your defense? That's crazy to me. You have to reallocate and bring in new defensive guys, and we'll see. I don't know ultimately what they're going to do, but if I were running Cincinnati, I have to make that hard decision. I have a conversation with Joe Barrow and say, hey, look, man, we can't keep both. We can keep one or the other. We
Yep.
can't keep both. We're keeping Jamar Chase because Jamar Chase is incredible, and we
You
love
don't like
T.
guys like that
Higgins.
out the door. You don't
Correct.
like guys like that out the
Yep.
door.
T. Higgins is a great player, but we're going to let him walk, and we're going to take that money, and we're going to use it on defense so that when you score 30 points, we win every time. Not you have the most losses in the history of the NFL with scoring 35 plus points again, and the most losses in the history of the NFL is scoring 30 plus points again, and the most losses in the history of the NFL is scoring 25 plus points again. That stuff can't happen. And so we have to rebuild the defense. And I think if I were them, that's what I'd be doing. But again, I don't know what they're going to do. You have to make your franchise QB happy. But to me, that's the conversation I would have is like, hey, look, I get it. But we don't have a choice. We have to bring in defensive guys. And then you go out and you actually spend that money on defensive guys.
Life lesson of the day, folks. Big 12 football does not work in the NFL. That's like the Kyler Murray Oklahoma Sooners, excuse me.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with you because I was just thinking if they want to keep both, if you're the Patriots, just go call Trey Hendrickson's agent and say, hey, does Trey want $20-25 million a year?
Yep.
I know everyone in the Patriots wants Milton Williams, Josh Sweat. Trey Hendrickson goes to free agency. You do not blink twice. You let him go because the Bengals had a similar move a few years ago. Jesse Bates walked because they couldn't give him enough money.
Yep.
He goes to Atlanta. Hey, you know what? Corners grow on trees. We're going to draft Dax Hill in the first round. Dax Hill, we don't even know if he's able to play anymore. It's just the trade-off's terrible. I know Sidney Brown and Chase Brown, excuse me. Sidney Brown's on Philly. Chase Brown, fellow Canadian like me, grew up about an hour from where I live now.
Okay.
He's a good running back, but look at what Joe Mixon is for Houston. And I know everyone likes to bag on the Giants for Saquon, but that's another move that I don't think it's talked about enough, that the Bengals were willing to let Mixon just say, okay, deuces, goodbye. We're going to let you walk. And then the Texans get on the phone and say, hey, you're going to let him walk? We'll give you a 6th-round pick for him. I think it was a 6th or 7th, where it's like, we can get something of value for him.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, why not? So that's the thing with Cincinnati, where their ownership, too, is also incredibly cheap. They literally had to change the name of they had to sell the naming rights to pay Joe Burrow. And, they're fascinating for that sense, too. But also the other fascinating team in that division, Baltimore's going to be – we know what Baltimore's capable of. We know what they're going to be. You also have Pittsburgh, too, who – is Pittsburgh in that Dallas Cowboy territory where they'll sell their fans a dream, but they know they can't cash in on it? It's like when they're when a city's like, hey, we're going to do this to improve infrastructure or transit, but that change doesn't come for another 10 to 15 years. That's kind of I think the Steelers are selling the whole, hey, we can compete for a Super Bowl, but realistically, we're going to win 10 games and we're probably going to flame out in the wild card round.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Pittsburgh's an interesting case too. That's another fascinating one, right? Where you look at it and just say how do we feel about Pittsburgh, right? And Mike Tomlin is a great coach, and maybe he gets them where he needs to go, maybe he doesn't. I don't know, but that's an interesting one for me. And it's almost like they never have a chance to rebuild because they're never bad.
Yeah.
Right, which is fine, but rebuilding from the middle is challenging, and we've seen them now. I mean, how long have they been trying to get a quarterback? Big Ben leaves, and they can't get a quarterback, and they reach for Kenny Pickett, which is a bad pick. They bring in Mitch Trubisky, which terrible player. They bring in Russ. They brought in Justin Fields. It's and they haven't been able to figure it out. And now it's all right, now what? And look, we can keep winning these games, and we have this, 10, 11 year, however many years in a row where we've won, we finished with a winning record and blah, blah, blah. We make the playoffs and And it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. You don't actually have a chance to compete. What difference does it make if you don't act? I mean, listen, not this past year, but the year before, they were like on a roll. They were like 10-3 or 8-3 or something like that. And they lost back-to-back games at home to Arizona, who finished with the number 4 pick, and New England, who finished with the number 3 pick. Back-to-back home games.
Yep.
Which essentially knocked them out of the playoffs. And it's like, how does that even happen? And that's the type of stuff where it's like, yeah, you finished 9-8. Who flipping cares that you finished with a winning record? Because if you lose those types of games, now it's like, just lose the rest of your damn season. What difference does it make? Right.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes difficult.
One of those teams you just said right there, I think is a very attractive destination for T. Higgins.
Who, Arizona?
Yeah. And I know everyone's going to say, oh, this and this, which one thing I'll say, I love everyone in the world going, like, not everyone, but man, some of these like sports sites like FanDuel does this all the time where they'll like throw out some obnoxious take. And I know it's just to get clicks. They said, was Marvin Harrison Jr. a bust? And I'm like, okay, I know he was not the best, but everyone had because here's the thing with a lot of these rookies. Everyone has unrealistic expectations for him to where when Malik Nabers plays the way he did, when Brian Thomas Jr., which,
yeah,
great fantasy pickup. When guys like that really pop, it kind of draws to everyone's like, oh, this player's bad. This player's this. No, Marvin Harrison Jr. just needs someone to help steal away possessions from him. So that's why if you pair up Higgins with Harrison Jr., it just opens up the playing field because you're not going to have Michael Wilson be wide receiver 2 forever in that team. Plus, I do think Jonathan Gannon is coaching for his job this year. I do think they need to make the playoffs or they need to win at least 8 games, I think, for him to keep his job.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Look, Marvin Harrison Jr. had, 60 catches, almost 900 yards, and 8 touchdowns last year. Like, he had a pretty good year. Now, again, he's a rookie. Everyone
it's like Bijan in year 1.
Yeah, everyone expected him to be like the greatest wide receiver in the NFL year 1. And like, there was some consensus that there was some people at the top that were saying Malik Nabers is a better wide receiver than Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's because he has some of that explosion. And Harrison has explosion. Don't get me wrong. He definitely does. But, he doesn't have the explosion like Malik Nabers has. And I find it so funny when, we flash back to 1 year ago where everyone's sitting here saying, I don't care that you need a quarterback, draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 3 anyways. And it's like, yeah, you're happy that, and then you hear, well, Elliot Wolf doesn't get any credit for drafting Drake May because he's the obvious pick there. And it's like, well, no, that's not true. He wasn't the obvious pick there. Everyone wanted to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. We saw how hard the Giants tried to trade up with the Patriots.
And the Vikings.
But the Vikings were rumored, right, to trade up. Now, of course, we don't have the exact details like we do with the Giants because of the documentary, the Hard Knocks they were filming. But like, to look at that and say they don't get any credit for drafting him, it's like, no, well, they stuck to their guns and they drafted the guy that they wanted to draft, and they deserve some credit for that. They don't deserve a ton of credit for it. They deserve some. We got to at least acknowledge that they could have done something else and they didn't. Right. And I think that to me is one of those things that like, that was not a 100% opinion going into the draft. Right. People looked at it and said, we don't want Drake May. I wouldn't draft Drake May. Someone said, was it Merrill Hodge? It was like, Drake May will get you fired. Right. Like, and so it's one of those things where like, it wasn't the obvious pick. You can say it was the obvious pick because you don't want to give Elliot Wolf credit. But it wasn't. And I think that, the Patriots deserve some credit for that. And so okay, but long story short, here's the idea, right?
Yeah.
When you circle back to who goes where and who's going to the spot and, unrealistic expectations for some of these guys. Marvin Harrison Jr., he's never going to be able to reach the expectations that he was given, right? They wanted him to be a top 5 receiver in the NFL right away. Day one. And that's just not realistic. And I love the idea of bringing in a guy like T. Higgins. Now, the only thing I don't love about it is that T. Higgins is a big-bodied guy like Harrison Jr. is also a big-bodied guy. He's a different style of receiver than Harrison Jr. is. Harrison Jr. is a better route runner, more of kind of that like possession receiver as opposed to T. Higgins is more of like the big-bodied receiver, can go down the field and grab it. So It's a little bit different of a player, similar body type, but different player. But like, get him another guy and just see what happens. And now, if he can't get double teamed on every play, now that opens things up for Marvin Harrison Jr. And maybe we see him develop into that guy, into that top 5 receiver in the NFL, like everyone thought he was going to be.
Yeah, because that's the thing too. He's gonna emerge. I feel like everyone does this too because it goes back to Kyle Pitts as well. Because remember, Kyle Pitts, it's like generational talent. He's gonna be this. He's gonna be great. That's a different case too. Where at first it was coaching, but then it's like I think that's a little bit more than coaching. I just don't think
Yeah.
he is who we thought he was going to be. Because I also think too at this time of year you get, or not even this time of year, like in 2 months from now, around April 25th, let's just say, throw a date out there. You're going to get guys that get drafted that these draft analysts, and this is no discredit to them because those guys do work. Like, the Bucky Brooks, Daniel Jeremiah's, Mel Kiper's, Field Yates, et cetera, et cetera. Nicole Auerbach, who I know she's a draft analyst, but she's a college analyst, and the college analysts come in at draft time and they go
do.
over everything. That's why
Yep.
I like Joel Klatt on the draft, like the NFL Network one, because that's the one I usually watch. And they'll come in and they'll say stuff, and then I feel like the casual fan or a lot of these like sports sites and like sports shows will take those takes, and then the NFL people will automatically assume, hey, listen to this. It's kind of like if you're at a bar and you get the loud, obnoxious guy that comes in. The loud, obnoxious guy is essentially the person who will watch film of a player or college tape or see what they see in Indy. As I'm watching there's some highlights right now from the combine. Unfortunately, it's Baltimore, and I think you know what they're talking about. But with going back to my original point with the loud guy in the bar, it's basically those people coming in and being like, oh, hey, so-and-so said this player is going to be good, so they're going to be amazing. And when they're not amazing, you tear them down.
Yeah.
Happened with Kyle Pitts, happened with Bijan, happened with Marvin Harrison Jr., to where then next year, if everyone's going to go out there and go, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a breakout year. And when he does, everyone's going to be like, oh, see, look, I was right. And it's like, well, you had this opinion last year, so why didn't you have this opinion this year?
Yeah, and I think too that
it's a double standard, really.
Yeah, 100% is, and I think also that we have been so conditioned through fantasy football now as well, where we look at it and say, all right, this guy is good in fantasy, so therefore he's good in real life, and that's not always the case, of course. Now, sometimes it is, right?
Like
sometimes the best player in fantasy is also the best player in the league. That's not always the case, right? And so, what is this guy doing? I think Kyle Pitts is a really interesting example of a player that I think just fell into. And again, I don't know if it's a situation where they're not using him correctly. I honestly don't know what the situation is with Kyle Pitts, because he had 1,000 yards his rookie year. Like, he's a good player, and they just haven't been able to figure it out. And so I don't know if it's on him, if it's on the coaching staff. I honestly don't have an answer for the Kyle Pitts thing. I do think that, that people want to be right, and they want to have those takes, and they squat on those takes. And then people also root for other people to be wrong.
Yep.
And so, more so than I don't like this guy. Well, this guy said he was going to be good, and I don't like that guy, so I'm rooting against him. And it's like, what are you doing, dude? Like, who cares? That's the stuff that really annoys me, because it's just like, you're just rooting against this guy just to root against him. And, and that's the stuff that annoys me. And so, I had no time for that when people were like, oh, I'm just rooting against this guy just because. And it's like, well, no, like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? It's the NFL. Like, should be rooting for those guys to do well. And whatever. Sometimes they're not.
There's another annoying one I have with fantasy football, where I remember last year in August, everyone's like making TikTok videos and stuff like that of like, I think I found this year's Puka Nacua. It's like, no, you haven't. The beautiful thing about a guy like Puka Nacua is because no one saw it coming.
Right.
That's a beautiful thing too. And I know there's a whole Brady and Mahomes takes right now, which, look, it's not that one's better than the other. It's just for right now, you can't really put the two in the same stratosphere because one never got their ass kicked in the Super Bowl twice. But with a guy like Nacua or Tom, I bring those points up because it organically happens.
Yep.
Wasn't the headlines look, and I only say this because I was 7 years old. I don't remember what life was like in 7, but wasn't 2001 after the Patriots game, everyone was like saying Bledsoe's hurt, the season's done, they're over. It's like it's
Oh
dead.
yeah. Listen, they signed Bledsoe to a 10-year, $100 million contract.
Could not go
He
heli skiing.
signed the highest contract in NFL history. He was the highest paid player in NFL history. And then months later, he almost died on the football field, right?
Credit
And
for
so
Lewis
like
for that one.
literally almost died. You know what I mean? Like that's I get it. People don't really understand. And there's a lot of stuff that people don't understand about that time. And about what happened in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
And as much grief as people gave the Dynasty documentary, and I think some of it rightfully so. The
Read
be
the book.
the beginning of the documentary was really good,
Mm-hmm.
and especially the Bledsoe stuff where they talked to his wife and they went through, and I think that Drew said he woke up and there's three people in the room with him, and it was Kraft, Belichick, and Brady, right? And like that's the relationship that they had, where they were close and they were together. And I look, I still say the Patriots don't win in 01 without Bledsoe, because Bledsoe could have turned around and said, no, this is my team, and the team would have fractured if he had done that, and he didn't. And I think that he deserves to be commended for that, and I think he has since done that. But young people who know who Brady is don't know enough about who Bledsoe is, right? And it just is what it is. What are you gonna do? But no, that was 100%. No one knew Brady. I mean, Brady was a 6th round pick in 2000, right? They just happened to keep the 4th quarterback on the roster because they saw something in him in 2000. And in 01, he had worked his way up to backup, and Bledsoe, who again is the highest paid player in the sport, in the history of the sport.
Yep.
And then 2 games into that gets hurt. Everyone's like, the season's over. And then, Brady plays well, Bledsoe comes back, and it's like, nah, we're keeping Brady in there. And it's like, you're doing what? What do you mean? And then Brady gets hurt in the AFC Championship game. Bledsoe comes in and plays well. And then the whole week leading up to the Super Bowl is about, is it Brady or Bledsoe? Brady or Bledsoe? Who's starting? They were doing online poll. They were doing the whole thing. They were doing online polls. They were doing everything. Who should start in the Super Bowl? And there was a lot of real discourse about who should be the starter in the Super Bowl. And there were a lot of legitimate NFL minds, including people in New England, saying that Bledsoe should be the starter of the Super Bowl, right? And like, imagine if Bledsoe. So that's the stuff that I don't think people quite understand the level of it, right?
Yeah.
And when you say it comes out of nowhere, like it literally came out of nowhere. I mean, the next year Bledsoe was traded for a 1st round pick. Like he still was that type of guy. We went and threw for 4,500 yards in Buffalo the next year. Like, he's a good player still, and he had some really good years after that. I think he led the league in passing one of the years for Buffalo. So like, he was still a very good player. He just isn't Tom Brady.
So a couple of things I wanted to bring up too, just because you were saying that too with the Dynasty, which I said it while you were talking, but I'll say it again. Read the book
Yeah.
for anyone out there who hasn't. Because look, for as much as like, oh, the documentary is bad, the book that Jeff wrote was just simply it details like every little detail. It goes into a lot of stuff that the Dynasty not, I don't want to say avoided, but they kind of like tiptoed around.
Yeah.
Which there was 2 players that were always highlighted in that one. And I know at the time they were more disgruntled. Go find a Rodney Harrison this offseason. Corey Dillon's a little different because I think going into it, he was like, everyone knew how good it was. It was just, hey, get him into the right team and situation. But Rodney Harrison was kind of like that. I always hear the story of how he was in Oakland and then he was just like, hey, you're going to Boston. And then they didn't let him leave. And he was in his shorts and it's like 40, it's like 30-degree weather. And he's in like shorts and a t-shirt and he had to go buy a coat. But no, that's just the point I want to make as well with that. Like, hey, go find a Rodney Harrison, go do that.
Yeah.
But I still do think that something is going to happen in the next 10 days with this team. I still see a world where someone that we do not expect gets cut. It's going to annoy people. People are going to get pissed off about it, which I swear to God, half this fan base is super fickle and it really pisses me off sometimes, is why I like talking to people like the ones that come on my show, like how I talk to you, Matt, Sophie, McGarvin, et cetera, the people that like, we know the truth, we know what's going on. And then you get the ones who get their hopes up to when then their hopes aren't delivered, they get pissed off. So that's the one point I want to say about there. But I still do think someone's going to get cut that people don't see coming. There was one player I kind of flirted with, but I don't know if it'll happen or not. Just
Who was
because,
that?
I don't like saying it, but there's part of me saying, do you move on from Ramondre because of just like, that unexpected cut that just sometimes it happens because, like how you're saying, Vrabel doesn't care. Business is business. I don't think it will happen. I don't think it should happen. It's just one of those things where it's like, hey, we paid you this money. You weren't you aren't playing to what you were. And for everyone saying this too as well, the beautiful thing about a lot of the contracts Elliott Wolf signed this past summer, a lot of them have escape doors.
Mm-hmm.
And for everyone saying,
Sure.
"Oh, what's that mean?" They can get out without having to bite a lot of money. And I'm not saying I don't like Ramondre Stevenson. I love him. I love tweeting out the gif of Andrew screaming Mondre whenever he scores a touchdown.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to look at this from the perspective of you don't want to get too attached to players because football is a business, and sometimes when business decisions get made, there's a reason for them getting made. So I
Yeah.
think that there's something along the lines of that, or even like I don't know, someone who's kind of not past their prime, but like even like is a Dietrich Wise, another guy that kind of like, odd man out in the sense of just like, oh, why are they doing this? And it's like, okay, I see why they're doing this. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to throw names and speculate on who. I'm just trying to
No,
think
I,
of like,
I listen. The Wise
yeah,
one is interesting because he's a free agent, right? And they don't have to bring him back.
I forgot about that.
And so, like, that's an interesting question. Like, do they want to bring Dietrich Wise back?
Yeah,
I think is a fascinating question. The Mondre one is interesting. I don't think I think the Mondre one they can get out of next year and not this
I'll
year.
look that up.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that's the case. I think it was a 4-year deal. I might be wrong, but it's one of those. It is one of those things. I can see it happening. I would be surprised if it happened now. I would think probably closer to training camp,
I do think
maybe
Kevin Harris is
after
gone, by the way.
OTAs. Say that again.
Kevin Harris is a guy I do think is not on the roster. I think they draft someone.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those like why are we keeping Kevin Harris around? You know what I mean? Like he doesn't really do anything. He's kind of redundant with Ramondre. He's not, he doesn't bring the same burst that Ramondre does anyways. Like we don't really need Kevin Harris around anymore.
Excuse
But
me.
we'll see. We'll see. It is interesting, and I think Vrabel has done a nice job of kind of shaking things up. I think the biggest thing for me is that I think at least these cuts will happen after mandatory minicamp. Because I think the idea is that what he wants to project and what he's projecting out, basically.
Yeah.
And, you heard Taylor Lewan afterwards, like watch your back, right? When you get in there, like you better be going, right? And I think that, all right, we got mandatory minicamp. Who's been here working on the offseason? All right, you haven't been working on there. Okay, let's see what happens. You come to mandatory minicamp.
Yeah.
You come to mandatory minicamp overweight, or you're not ready to go, or you're not giving full effort, or whatever. Okay, all right, that's how it is. See ya. I think that he's almost going to wait to make an example out of someone because that's what he wants, right? Is that on the field production. I don't care about who your name is, where you're from. None of that stuff matters to me. What matters to me is about how you perform on the field. And if you're not going to perform on the field, you're out. And I think that, you can wait until mandatory minicamp, still before the draft, but you can wait until mandatory minicamp to kind of have those OTAs and have those things. And you say, okay, oh, you're not bringing it? All right, you're not focused? Oh, okay, you didn't put that work in the offseason. We can see it. All right, see you later. And that's the standard that we set here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, that's kind of, I think at least, that to me is kind of where he'll make that move. Because I do think you're right, that something's going to happen a little unexpectedly, right? I mean, look, Parcells came in, and Irving Fryer. I mean, Irving Fryer was number 1 pick for the Patriots, right? He was the best player. And
Belichick and Lawyer Malloy.
yeah. And Laura, a few years later, but still, same idea, right? And but Belichick, Parcells walks in, and it's basically day one, and he's like, "Hey, everyone's doing this," and and Urban Fire is basically like, "Yeah, no, I'm not doing that." He goes, "All right, pack your bag, see you later," and just cut him on the spot. Like, we don't care. Goodbye. Like, we don't play that way around here, right?
Like,
and I think that that's a message that he's going to send. But I think again, he'll wait until the message he's been getting right now is good. So let's wait until OTAs. Let's see who put the work in. Let's see who's ready to go. And if you're not ready to go, all right, you're not ready to go. Pack your bag. See you later.
Exactly. It's like, and when I say so, I don't want people to get the wrong idea of me thinking like, oh, this. No, I'm just looking at it from, certain perspectives.
Yeah.
Going back to Ramondre, so his contract's interesting. The base for this year is 2.75. It's 4.75, and then it's 6 for 27 and 8 for 28, and he's a free agent in 29. But the dead cap money is only for the next 2 seasons. It's $6 million this year and it's 3.25 next, and then there's no dead cap after 25 and 26. So
Yeah.
even say if they draft someone this year, say if they the Matthew Judon pick, which look, say what you want about Elliott Wolf, that trade looks amazing now.
Yep.
You basically draft someone now. If by 26, Ramondre is either getting older or he's not really carrying his weight, and the new kid on the block is there to take over, you
Yeah,
run
$3
with
million
it.
bucks. $3 million bucks isn't much.
I'm also not I'm not here to say too, like, oh, I hope he's cut or anything like that. No, it's just me thinking of players that would like shock the world. Like another guy I always thought of was like, oh, what about the Kyle Duggar situation? I think that was more injury than just anything else. I think that was just
I hope
you
so.
like,
Yeah.
but he's the same thing too, where it's like all that stuff as well. Like, hey, I doubt it. I doubt they would just because we've seen, and also the one thing I really hated about this year too was all the people that were saying, "Oh, Belichick merchant," like Jelani Tavai, which that's not Belichick merchant. That was just without Bentley, he was lost. It's kind of
Right.
like when a point guard is missing a shooting guard, and it's just
Yeah.
like a lost puppy out there, where it's like when your dog would like look around and just be like, like, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
That was Tavai in coverage
One,
all
I
season.
think too that your position matters, right? Where you
Mhm.
play matters, right? And I remember, the example I always give is Kyle Van Noy, right? Donta Hightower
Oh
gets
yeah,
hurt, Kyle Van Noy fills in for him, and he's god awful. I mean, god awful to the point where Felger Maz like calling him a bad person. Like it's just like it was
of
a
course
mess,
you were.
right? And so but then Hightower comes back, and Van Noy's good again, and it's like, yeah, no kidding, because he's playing the right spot. And Tavai is never going to be a Pro Bowler, right? He's not going to be one of the best linebackers, but he plays a role. When you ask him to play Donta Hightower's role, he's going to suck in it because that's
Yeah.
not what he does, right? So he has to play his role. And if he's in his role, he's an okay player. He's a decent player for you. And I think that, he's playing out of position. And so he wasn't good last year. I think we see a bounce back from Tavai this year a little bit. I'll tell you right now, I hope Divine never sees the field because I want Nick Bolton here.
Oh
That's
yeah.
I want Nick Bolton so bad. I've loved him since he came out of Missouri. I want him so bad on this team. If you can get Nick Bolton and you put Bolton and Bentley next to each other, you're talking about a force of a linebacking core that I think will be really, really solid. And again, you have Tavai coming off the bench, which I think is good. And I feel
Special teams
like,
too.
right. And I feel like then you feel a lot better about the middle of your defense if you can bring in a guy like Nick Bolton. And so, I think linebacker is a position of need for them. And I think it's one that not a lot of people are talking about. But a guy like Nick Bolton is interesting. Is it Greenlaw from San
Yeah.
Francisco? And then there's Zach Bond, but I don't think Zach Bond is really fits what the Patriots want to do. And I also worry about Zach Bond because playing a different role, but he was awful in New Orleans. And then he
Looked great
went
with
to
Philly.
Philly, which was a great team already. He was incredible in Philadelphia, don't get me wrong. But I worry about giving him a bag and then he comes in and he's somewhere between what you saw in New Orleans and Philadelphia. And you're never getting what you saw in Philadelphia. That's my biggest concern with him is that he's never going to reach that point again because you don't have the defense that Philadelphia has, right? And so,
Yeah.
We'll see. But that's my concern.
The one player and also I still say this too, that Nick Bolton's going to walk from Kansas City and they're going to get Jack Sawyer up in linebacker, and it's going to be annoying. I know we also actually we'll talk about Kansas City in a second. I feel like linebacker is not a talked about position because it's not sexy like a lot of the other positions are, where it's like, oh, defensive end, wide receiver, lineman. Well, because lineman, Jesus Christ. But you know what I mean? Like, it's not one of those ones that's looked at as like great. It's like also, too, hey, you could get a great cornerback to pair with Christian Gonzalez. You can get X, Y, and Z. Like this year, I do want to see them use at least split the draft picks up at least, not 50-50, but like if you go 65-35, where it's like you go X amount of offense, X amount of defense, because you can't have a draft again where it's just, hey, we're going to only take one defensive player the entire draft and he's going to turn into a special teamer, which I'm not saying anything bad about Dial. Dial's someone
No,
I was
but
big on.
yeah.
But, you know, it's one of those things where it's just like, you know, you got to keep just finding new ways to invent the wheel. The one player from Philly, I know everyone's like Josh Sweat or Zach Bond. I do think Zach Bond's going to end up going somewhere and getting a little bit more than he should have. And everyone's going to look at it and go, oh, this. And it's like, okay, what happened in Philly? And then I think Josh Sweat's just out and probably not going to be in New England. But the two players I look at that were deep in the playoffs, one's on Philly, one's not. I look at Milton Williams. I feel like he's a player you can get for fair, not cheap, but like a lot cheaper than like Josh Sweat or what Zach Bond's probably going to want.
Yeah.
Or what about Jonathan Allen, who today just said, hey, I want to trade. I want out. I know I saw Greg Thompson tweet like 100%. And I'm like, no, Buffalo, no. Buffalo, no. I know you need defense, but no.
Yeah.
You need corners, not linemen.
No, and that's you know, to me the holes. What's interesting about the Patriots situation is that they need everything, right? They need everything. So they need a wide receiver, they need offensive linemen, they need tight end, they need a pass rusher, they need D tackle, they need edge, they need linebackers, they could use a corner, they could use safety help. Like they need everything, right?
Yeah.
And so anytime anyone pops up, it's like, ooh, that guy's good. We could take him. Jonathan Allen? Yeah, okay, let's do it. Like I saw that. I'm like, okay, all right, Jonathan Allen's good. Like I'm down with that. And so it's like, but it's everyone. Like I just want them to go out and get talented guys at every position. And again, you're not going to go out and sign the top guy for every spot. I think Milton Williams is a perfect fit for what the Patriots want to do.
Yes.
I think it's a perfect example of what Mike Vrabel was talking about feeling good about your team before the draft. I love Mason Graham as a player. I think he's a great player. I don't know how I feel about taking D tackle at number 4. I just don't know how I feel about it, especially if Christian Barmore is healthy.
Yeah.
We don't know if Christian Barmore is healthy, but if he is, and if he can play this year, I just don't know how I feel about taking a defensive tackle at number 4 overall. But if you sign Milton Williams and you get that guy in free agency, now you feel like we don't have a hole in the middle anymore. We feel good about Barmore next to Milton Williams. And we look at it and say, okay, now what do we do? All right, well, now we can use that number 4 pick on Travis Hunter or on Abdul Carter if he's there, or maybe we trade back and, and we draft someone else, right? Whether it's Michael Williams or whatever the case may be, right? And so it's those types of things where I look at it and say, bring in as many guys, bring me everyone, right? Like
bring in the cavalry.
But you have to, and I think you can't sign the top guy from every spot, right?
No.
So then it becomes what guy is going to fit our system the best, right? And you go back to 01. 01 worked because you found guys that were maybe unwanted in other places, and you put them in the position that you needed them to be in, and you scouted yourself and them well enough to understand that these guys belong in this spot. They're going to thrive in this role, and that's what we're going to do. And then they thrived in those roles, right? And so you say, okay, can we do that this year? Can we identify players? They may not be the best player, but can we identify guys that do something that we need, that fill a role that we need them to fill? And then when we ask them to do that, they're ready for it and they can fill it admirably. And I think that that's really the biggest question that's, that faces the Patriots. And, and we'll see. We'll see where we're headed from that. I do think that Elliott Wolf is not the main shot caller anymore. I think the talkie move kind of pointed to that.
Yeah.
He was a guy that Elliott Wolf was very high on. He's gone early. So I think that that's a little bit of a message to everyone like, hey, Mike Vrabel's the guy in charge. Elliott Wolf's going to be helping. And, Cowden's going to be helping and the, whatever. But like, we're back to what we were with Bill Belichick. Like Mike Vrabel's the guy. He'll take advice. He'll take input. But ultimately, he sees the team that he wants, and he's going to build it that way.
That's exactly it. It's a collaborative effort where 2024, I came up with a great analogy today. You know how you see all those like movies and shows where it's like two friends and one had feelings for the other, so it's kind of like, hey, let's try it out, and then it's just like, oh, I preferred you as a friend, not a partner, so it's
Mhm.
going to be a very awkward breakup. That's what I think the Gerard Mayo
Yeah.
Kraft situation was. But no, with the Patriots, it's like I said, bring in the cavalry, see what happens. You only have hey, throw something at the wall, hope it sticks. That's
Right.
the thing you got to hope for. Before we wrap up today, though, I just wanted to talk about Kansas City just because, look, there's a lot of talk with them of like everything
Yeah.
going on. My big thing with them always has been evolving and adapting.
Yeah.
They have Patrick Mahomes' $66 million cap hit, which I do expect them to restructure in the next week. Travis Kelce comes back. That's a big cap hit. You have also a bunch of other guys with cap hits where it's crazy. You also have to sign Trent McDuffie, who's an all-pro.
Mhm.
You have, in my opinion, what I think is one of the more underrated defensive ends in George Karlaftis, who's going to want a new contract to sign.
Yep.
Leo Chanel as well, who I know is another guy you like coming out of Wisconsin a few years ago.
Mhm.
So my thing for them is, how do you fix and adapt but still keep your status as what they've been? Just because I feel like now every year it's always, and I remember talking about this before the season with everyone with Kansas City, where it's like, hey, they're good, but they'll fix their problems. This year was their problems caught up to them at the wrong time.
Yeah, and I mean, the wrong time was the Super Bowl, so, like, I guess,
Yeah. Worst day to have your worst game.
right, but I mean, at the end of the day, you also got all the way to the Super Bowl, right? And I think that, when you start looking at it and you say, "Okay, yeah, we played our worst game, but, it was in the Super Bowl. We got all the way over there." And so which is good. Now, the question for me becomes, where do you fill those guys in? And so you mentioned it, right? They've adapted and they've changed who they are. And I think the Patriots, are a team that did that as well, right? Where they adapted and they changed and they made these different moves. And well, how do you do it? You do it
Mm-hmm.
by drafting guys and having undrafted free agents that play well. And I think where they've struggled a little the last few years is in the drafting, right? 2022, you draft McDuffie, Karlaftis, Sky Moore, who stinks, Leo Chanel,
Yep.
right? Pacheco in the 7th round. Like, that's a great draft. Now, Sky Moore turns out to be a bum. That stinks. Brian Cook doesn't really do anything. Joshua Williams, like, who the heck's that? Darian Kennard never really played. Then you say, okay, all right, 2024, 2023, sure. Then you draft, I don't even know, some random defensive end, stinks, doesn't play. Rashee Rice, who like up and down, hurt, obviously has some other issues. Wanya Morris, who played a little bit this year, but like didn't, and that's it,
Could not play.
right? You get nothing else. Then this year, Worthy, good player, great. Kingsley whatever. You get it.
Play.
You understand. Couldn't play.
Patriot fans wanted him. I remember Patriot
Couldn't
fans
play.
were clamoring for him.
And so now you're wondering, okay, who's coming in to save us? You drafted Creed Humphrey, great player, phenomenal player.
Best center
But
in the
like
league.
that 2021 draft, Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, Noah Gray, Trey Smith. Absolute incredible draft.
Oh, yeah.
The year before, you drafted Ladarius Sneed and Willie Gay. And so it's like you start seeing some of these draft picks and you're like, okay, now you're filling in these roles. The last few years, 2023 and 2024, you really haven't done that. So now Trey Smith's probably going to leave. Nick Bolton's probably going to leave. Who's filling in those roles? Who's taking over for those guys? And are you going to have to go out and sign someone in free agency? But do you have the money to do that? Right. And so now I think this year becomes a really big year for them in the draft, and you got to find some young, cheap guys because you're getting to the end of Travis Kelce might be back for one more year. It sounds like he's going to be. But you're getting to the end of Travis Kelce's career. And so Xavier Worthy looked pretty good in his rookie year, but like Rashee Rice was up and down. He was hurt. He's got legal issues. He's got also some other stuff. Don't really have another wide receiver. So like where, So like that becomes the issue, right? Juju Smith-Schuster is getting like a lot of run in the Super Bowl for you. Like that's not good. That's not what you want, right? DeAndre Hopkins at the end of his rope really doesn't have anything left, right? And so they're just throwing darts, hoping something sticks. And so for the Chiefs, they have to be able to restock this year in the draft. They did a really good job with it for a multitude of years, and they've kind of fallen off a little bit the last few years. That's where you're going to start to see that creep in, where some of these guys start leaving, and how can we replace them? Can we replace them with good players, with good enough players, right? L'Jarius Sneed's a great corner. They traded him and, still had a really solid defense this past year, right? And so it's like we were able to fill that need because, we have guys that can play. All right, Nick Bolton leaves. Now what do you got? Willie Gay's good linebacker, but like, is that it? Leo Chanel, good linebacker. Is he going to want a new deal? Like, so that becomes the question. Trey Smith leaves. Who fills in that role, right? And so those are those questions that you don't have the answer to, and so they have to really have a good draft if they want to be competitive again next year. And and maybe they will, but that's gonna really be the determining factor for me.
Like, I still think they win the division, and I think the Chargers will be good. My take is I do think the Broncos take a bit of a step back just because I think people get film on Bo Nix. Not to say they're bad, but it's kind of like what happened with CJ Stroud, where where it's like,
he'll have a little bit of a sophomore slump, I think.
Yeah. Not Drake though. That's a different story. And then Vegas, Vegas is there. Pete Carroll has brought it. That's just build a culture, get things right, sort it out, win 5 or 6 games, and then kind of long term.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about Kansas City. It's not as a Patriots fan trying to dunk on them, but it's just the wondering of like New England was so good at adapting and changing year in and year out. I wonder now, and also with Mahomes turning 30, and the last few years, he's made plays when he's had to, but he's never like. There's some times and moments where it's like, okay, he's looked good, but then there's other times where it's like, Patrick, like the one play I always think about from the Super Bowl was Jalen Hurts throws that pick, you go 3 and out.
Yeah.
That's a problem. So I want to see what they do. They're almost at like the crossroads where Buffalo was last year. And I say that in a way of like, they know they have to change, but I want to see how they do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
like,
look,
how do you keep the mystique of the Chiefs?
Yeah, they're where the Patriots were, right? Where, they're the Patriots. They are. They're the Patriots of the mid 2000s, right? Where you're looking at it saying like, oh man, like they're still good because they have Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
And, and we're saying, all right, like it's still Patrick Mahomes. So we still have a chance to win the Super Bowl every year. And we're probably going to win our division every year, even though I think the Chargers will still be good. You're right. They'll have some competition, but I think they still win the division. Then the question becomes, all right, well, now what? How do you, and that's the biggest question. If they can adapt, if they can change the way they play, if they can continue to build their defense up to make them, a ferocious defense,
or rebuild their offense,
and rebuild their offense at the same time as well. And I think that's really then the question. Can they do that? And if they can, good for them. Right. If they can, good for them, but we'll see kind of how that goes. And I think that ultimately is going to be the question that determines what their future looks like. Right. Because look at the Patriots from like 2006 to 2010. They had a few rough drafts in there, right? From really 2005. You want to go back to like 2005, from like 2005 to like 2010, they had some really rough drafts. And, they got a few good guys. They drafted Draw Mayo in there, and they drafted other guys in there as well. But like, 2009, you draft, what's his name at the Edelman in the last round, in the 7th round. 2010, you draft Evan McCourty, you draft Rob Gronkowski, you draft Aaron Hernandez, and then all of a sudden it's like your team's good again. Then 2011, you're in the Super Bowl, right? And so then, a few years later, the next year in the AFC Championship game again. Then the next year in the AFC Championship game again. Then you're in the AFC Championship game again and win the Super Bowl. And so it's like that's what started it. It was those drafts, 2010, 2011, 2012, even 2013. Like those were like 3 or 4 really good drafts in a row where all those players, as they were growing, and then you had some good players that were holdovers still, right? but you built that depth of young guys, and that's where
Absolutely.
you took off on that second dynasty. And so if the Chiefs want to do that and the Chiefs want to stay relevant and stay good, they have to continue to draft because they're going to keep losing guys. You got to replace them with someone, right? And so that's going to be the question. Can they do it? And I don't know, maybe they can, but let's see how they reinvent themselves and play without Travis Kelce and play without Andy Reid at some point, maybe, right? Because Andy Reid's getting up there. He's pushing 70, right? How many more years does he have? And so that ultimately is going to be the question.
I do think with Andy Reid, it'll probably be something like, I don't know, he'll say kind of like, hey, older, health, all that stuff. I'm not wishing anything bad against him. I'm just saying, like, look, getting older, there's some stuff that comes up. But with Travis Kelce, though, look, it's like I said, I want to wait to hear it from the horse's mouth first.
I agree.
Before I know Brett Beach and Andy, because like right now they're like probably thinking like, hey, he hasn't said anything to us. He hasn't any inklings. But if you listen to that New Heights episode from after the Super Bowl, he was saying some stuff where I was just
raw
like,
emotions too. You know what I mean?
it's
It's hard to take that. You know what I mean?
it's a lot of emotions, but it was also gearing towards where it's like, oh, I don't know. But then now it's like if you come back, like I'd rather see him retire where he is than still try to play. And it's like
Doesn't have it anymore.
doesn't have it anymore. It's not in the tank. Like I was saying last year, don't draft him for fantasy because of this. I do think they bring back Hollywood Brown on a cheap deal. I think for what he did, he was okay. But the only thing I'll say with just the rest of them is just they'll be good. It's just if they go 12-5 or 13-4, or even next year, which this is going to happen, 14-4. 18's coming. It's coming.
I know.
But that's the thing. We're not saying they're going to be bad. It's just how do you reinvent yourself? Because that's what made the Patriots great, where it was, hey, it was defense, then it was offense, and then the back half, you had both where, hey, offense and defense both can win you games, But it's going to be interesting the next few weeks to see what really happens for all 32 teams and where they all are and where they all buckle down. And for me, well, guys, this may be my last episode before free agency because as of next Wednesday, I am MIA as I will be in the middle of the ocean when free agency happens. I leave for Florida next Wednesday. So taking some time off. We'll see. Unless something huge happens, you probably won't see or hear from me until for about a couple weeks. So I'm just going to give you that warning right now.
Love it. Nice.
But anyway, Pat, I know we went a little bit over time. It was we were talking. We're almost at the 90-minute mark. But you know what? That's what happens when you have a good football conversation that you and I haven't had in almost 6 months.
It's true. It's a good point. It's true.
Yeah. You know what? But anyway, guys, 350 are done. Here's the next 350. You may see me before free agency. You may not. I don't know. I'll keep you guys posted. Follow me on socials for everything like that. But anyway, guys, for Pat Lane, I am Griff. Have a good night. And remember, free agency's coming. Patriots, spend some goddamn money.